fall into that fine. But I don't think it's necessary. So if you just settle for these sections, what would you do? Where would you start?
Criteria.
The criteria. And then immediately a paragraph that starts out by saying the criteria above were developed through a process that is described following. And then what section headings will we find following? We're going to find the background of the situation, which focuses not on the evaluation, but on the program and why it needs an evaluation, or in fact, what the mandate to you has been. What were the instructions? What was the command that you're responding to? What did they hire you to do? And let me suggest that as you're doing this proposal, think of some organization where you have enough knowledge that you can kind of rationalize this and feel it through as you go to make it a lot easier. But don't put yourself in the position of the doer of this project that's being evaluated. Don't put yourself in the place of the guy who's delivering the service. Put yourself in the position of the evaluator. And the evaluator is never the person running the program. That's known sometimes as leaving the cat in charge of the canary. And that imagery works interculturally to say, that's not the right way. Okay. After the overview, then what? Not background, the overview, but after the background of the situation. Then what? Population. Now, the population of whom? Of what?
People from whom you're going to get your data.
Not necessarily. The clients of this program. But that's what you're talking about, the background of this program. It's not the background of the evaluation. That's the last section. This is the background of the program, the thing you're evaluating. And then at the end of that, or conceivably at the front end of that, you deal with the population. Who is this for? Who is it functioning for? What's the population here of this clientele? So you can think of it as population, parenthesis, clientele. C-L-I-E-N-T-E-L-E. What does that word mean?
The people you work for, the people that are being served, the
The
clients.
program is serving, clientele of the program. Who is this program serving? This has nothing at this point to do with the evaluations. It has a great deal to do with helping to set up the vision. Then what do we go? Where do we go from there? So we're ready now to start moving toward the evaluation description. And we can start that with the stakeholders, and then move from there right on into overview of your evaluation plan. Now, your evaluation plan is not where you review what this program is about. That was earlier. Does that make sense? Now then, you're going to draw from section 2 ideas the way you've been drawing all your other sections. Is it possible to have 2 subsections in section 2? What would they be? What would they be? And again, now you're going to be able to answer this if you remember how you got the 2 for the experiment. Evaluative research procedure. Why not a section in which you cite 2 or 3 good sources, not a whole library, but 2 or 3 good sources that have given you some ideas about how to think about this evaluative study. And there are some good sources around this building and elsewhere. The evaluative research books are easier to get than any other kind. There's some manuals upstairs and so on. I was delighted to find 2 of you found David Kraftwald this week in experimental design. He's one of the best writers on experimental design in the field today. It's wonderful. How many of you found David Kraftwald spelled with a K, K-R-A-T-H-W-O-L? Is it just you 2? Oh, I knew it was 2, but I figured that was the same family. David Kraftwald, a dear friend of mine. He was my first in-house mentor when I became a faculty member at Michigan State. At that time, he was the director of our Bureau of Research for the College of Education. And he was just a really singularly outstanding person. He's about 4 years older than I am. He had done his doctorate at the University of Chicago, where his major professor was Benjamin Bloom. Ring a bell? The great insight man who developed the Bloom taxonomy, which is one of the most long-lived pieces of educational exposition you can find anywhere. He was his grad assistant, and in fact, the second volume, the volume of Taxonomy of Educational Outcomes, volume 2, The Affective Domain, primary author of that book, you happen to know? Krathwohl and Bloom. And it was during that book when Dave and I got acquainted at Michigan State. And he had a 2-car garage that was absolutely top to bottom, chock full of files on that affective domain study. You would not believe the masses of data on the study. And he directed it from his garage. It was an extremely fine piece of work. He subsequently went to become dean at Syracuse University. He was dean at Syracuse for most of his career, and he's retired now. With a daughter living in Wheaton, and comes out to see her every now and then. His wife has Alzheimer's disease and is in the last stages of Alzheimer's. He has been a fabulous, faithful, gentle person. He basically has a very gentle disposition, very soft-spoken and kind, a fabulous Christian. And so I just thought I'd mention Dave Krathwohl. Somebody found him, and he's one of my specials. But, and he's never written very much. He's probably written far less than I have. But he's finally written a book that is in its second edition that is somewhat like Borden Bell, but it is so strongly emphasizing experimental that I think he does not ground this course adequately in the other notes. And otherwise, I'd like to be accused of it. Okay. Anything else? What about chapter 3 then?
Talk about the second section.
Oh yeah, the second section would be obviously the topic or the theme of this thing you're evaluating. So if it's dealing with, for example, moral development, then you need the literature on moral development. If it's dealing with, for example, one of your things in student personnel work, the literature there. So it'd be the literature of whatever this program is that you're evaluating. The literature dealing with the theoretical understandings of that area of learning and development. Third section. How would you set up a procedure section? Now this is where I really believe I'm going to have to trust you to apply what you're learning. Because every one of you are going to go off in a different direction on this one. The minute I give you a handful of headings, it's going to not work for some, and work well for others. So I'm going to say to you all just this. In sections 3 and 4 and 5. You've been there, you've done that. Do it again. Now you say, well, do I go back to the experimental or do I go back to the descriptive? What is the answer to that? Both, and then draw appropriately. And you'll find that that really does answer this question. What would be the names of those sections then? For 3, or 4, or 5? Same kinds of names that would appear in an experimental study, with one addition, and that is your analysis, especially in 4. It's going to be all the measurement against criteria. Now that's where you're going to find that the experimental helps you more, because your description of data analysis for the experimental was concerned exactly with that. Yeah. Your procedure in 4 is going to deal with measurements against criteria. which is essentially the same thing you do with a time series or any other experiment. You're measuring against criterion. The difference is that the criterion is the free score in the case of an experimental study. In the case of a evaluative study, your criterion is based on your pre-score is based on your criteria. And that's one reason why we had to create some pre-scores to be able to conceptualize, for example, this game thing that we were talking about. Don was talking about. But you will probably have to invent only a couple more titles for your sections in order to deal specifically with measuring the criterion or measuring against or measuring against. Now, measuring it against simply means using it as a standard measure. Anybody find this surprising? One of my premises, and I've mentioned it, I'll mention it once again so you can be reassured if that's what you need. One of my premises about this is that if we simplify all this, and bring it down to as many things that are as parallel as we can make, then we will more quickly understand how these units of idea function. And we will be able to transfer more readily from our understanding of one to our understanding of the other among these three basically different purposes. So trust yourself and go for it. Yes, ma'am.
How much section 2 expands it?
Section 2. No more or less than we've seen in the other 2 years. And we've seen there anything ranging from 3 pages to 10 pages. That's what I'm expecting. Somewhere between 3 pages and 10 pages. There's no reason that sector of this paper would be extraordinarily larger or smaller or fundamentally different from what you've been doing. And remember, my outside warning from the beginning has been, don't lavish so much time on section 2 that you shortchange section 1 and 3, because the main focus of our evaluations is on 1 and 3. That make sense?
The concern is, in this evaluative proposal, I'm changing a topic that's a little different from my dissertation interest, so it's going to look more skimpier in chapter 2, and that's okay or not.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I hope that you will not feel obligated at this point to make this proposal track with either the topic or the theme of your dissertation. It's too remote. Think programs. Think your practical world. Think what it is that you do, and as a professional, you're apt to be able to be called upon to do it even more in the future. If somebody were to call upon you to help in evaluation, what would it be about? And most of us can say, well, I'm afraid I know it probably related to something that I'm doing now, or with some others. Yeah, I kind of know. Well, that's what I'm suggesting you invest in. Keep it as practical and real as you can. And feel free to make up facts, the descriptive facts about the situation that you're playing with. In other words, don't say, I don't know anything about this population. No. If you don't know anything about this population, you can't write the blooming proposal. So know something about them. Say, well, I really don't, to be honest with you. Well, I have a magic wand, and I perform a ritual. Focus, focus. I know this. You now know. All right? Now, right. What's your question?
Yesterday you talked about population 1, sample 1, population 2, sample 2.
Yep.
And I'm sure that must have been while I was sleeping, but it's not really clear why the 2.
Well, if you have 2 populations, you're going to have a sampling of grounds from each. So you have 2 samples, just as sure that you have 2 populations.
Right, but I'm not clear on why you would need two populations.
People were leaning that direction a minute ago with this study. Did you hear it? I heard people thinking that this was really a 2 population study problem. One population was called the clients. The other population was called the stakeholders. I was trying to steer you away from that because you really don't have to think of it that way. But there are many kinds of studies that you do have to think of that way, both experimental and this was happening when you wouldn't. Unless you design it, to involve a 2 population program. But if I'm trying, for example, in one frame of reference to deal with 2 fundamentally different sets of people, let's say I'm running a college, and one of my populations is what you might call bright, rosy-cheeked college students who come fresh from high school and they're in my college. That's a population. Most colleges today have a second population. I'm not talking about graduate students, I'm talking about undergraduate colleges. What is the second population? Which are, what's the initials used again? What did you just, I'm sorry, anybody?
Re-entry students.
Re-entry students. I thought I heard it. Yeah, different institutions call them by different acronyms and different initials, but it's basically students who are coming back for degree completion. Sometimes called re-entry, sometimes degree completion, sometimes called retread. People that are coming back to finish up something. Now, is that the same population as my rosy cheek? Fundamentally different. Now, what would happen if I simply folded that together and described that as one population with lots of variants? Probably going to miss the fact that some of the things that are very valuable for one of those populations is fundamentally not valuable for the other. Institutions have found this to such an extent that people now have very different curricula at the undergraduate level, different degree requirements for the re-entry student. And the more flexible the institution, the more apt it is to be really significant. Now, if that's the case where to evaluate that program, you would really need between 2 populations. Well, obviously, 2 populations, if you define those and describe them separately, then you're going to have to sample them with respect to it. So you'll have 2 samples.
Yeah, I guess I heard a prescription yesterday rather than
No.
a possibility.
No, by no means. By no means. In other words, if you heard it said that you should have 2 populations. No, I said you should have 2 samples. If you have 2 populations, that's where the prescription is in. Now, I may have said it wrong. I think one time, yesterday or today, I even used the word hypothesis. Well, I'm trying to get you out of it. Do it. God bless you.